Hi everyone, welcome to the Bytes Technical Summit. My name is Steven Nesbitt. I'm a systems engineer and Office 365 specialist here at Varonis. And I've been asked to talk a little bit about how Varonis is helping customers secure their data as they move up into the cloud. And we're going to go through a couple of topics here. Really wanted to start by sort of setting the scene of the challenge really around unstructured data, but also talk a little bit about the new world of work that we find ourselves in, what with COVID-19, etc. But principally, we're going to talk about the explosion of Microsoft Teams, how any organization of any significant size really is going to see a massive increase in scale of the number of SharePoint environments that back-end those Microsoft Teams, and what challenges that engenders. And then we're going to look at a demo in the Varonis platform to really show how we can start to address some of these. Finally, we're going to just take a look at Varonis's approach to data governance more broadly and what the kind of next steps are. So the challenges with unstructured data haven't changed massively, whether we're talking about on-prem into the cloud. What's really changed quite a lot recently, though, is the adoption of cloud services and the move away from quite tight permissions regulation, ideally, on premises, to a much more democratized idea of effectively people having their own sharing environments in the cloud and being able to pretty much invite anybody that they like into those. Those environments are mainly based on SharePoint Online. And if you're a member of a team, for example, you pretty much have access to everything in that team. And so when you start to ask questions about where sensitive data might be at risk within the organization, it can get quite challenging to answer, because obviously there's a lot more of these teams environments, and the sharing that's done within them is a lot more complicated. So answering simple questions such as where is a specific type of data, who has access to it, what are they doing with that access, is it as secure in the cloud as it was on premises, is the right data in the cloud, are we allowed to store that data up there, suddenly become a little bit more challenging. That then kind of leads into compliancy then, okay, whether it's internal or external audits or regulations you have to comply to. How do we demonstrate this? How do we ensure that we are down to a least privileged access model, that we understand where sensitive data is in with the organization, and we really have a best practice approach to being able to manage that? Also, do we still need some of the data that we're holding? One of the worst things that I see is people moving whole hosts of basically stale data up into Office 365 that no one's going to look at again, just because they feel they need to keep it. And with regulations such as GDPR, we have to have a business reason for doing that and retaining that data. So it's really important to be able to clean that data out. We also need to be able to view the cloud and on-prem as kind of one whole. We need to be able to look at unified classification across both and be able to track threats across both environments as well. Most organizations struggle with the idea of answering a question around a particular piece of data in Office 365, but when you ask that question across the broader structure of the organization, such as on-prem as well, it suddenly becomes really, really difficult. Also, how do we make sure that everything that happens in our cloud and on-premises environment is tracked and monitored successfully, so that we can react to things when we start to see malicious behavior? And finally then, from a remote working perspective, how has the change to much more of our organizing working from home affected our data? A lot of digital transformation has happened at speed over the last 6 months or so, and we're seeing a huge amount of data suddenly being rushed into the cloud to allow business as usual. However, a lot of businesses now are taking stock of that and just trying to understand, okay, we've moved a lot of this data into the cloud. What controls did we put in place in order to do that? And it's this question that Varonis often gets involved to answer. We kind of touched on this a little bit before, but ultimately, Office 365 is now a major part of most organizations' productivity and collaboration strategy. There's really no way around that. It's become the go-to meeting place for everything from conference calling to sharing files. And it's exploded in a way that, I'm sure it outstripped even Microsoft's predictions. But with all that positivity and all that benefit of effectively moving to, this idea of digital transformation and effectively giving people the ability to work from anywhere, it has put in new risks, the least of which, no, not least of which is, the amount of data that's been pushed in those environments, the amount of data that's been created in those environments that may be overshared both internally and externally. And just the sheer amount of complication and confusion that results in many multiples of scale when you start to add in SharePoint environments. Microsoft Teams, I think, is fundamental to this whole conversation. Microsoft Teams, as I'll get to in a second, utilizes SharePoint and OneDrive as backend storage for both for file servers, and it effectively is built upon a lot of technologies that existed in the first place. The latest results from Microsoft say there's 115 million daily active users within Microsoft Teams, and they are using that application to effectively reach into all the various different aspects of Office 365, whether it be Exchange Online, Azure Active Directory, OneDrive. All these things are provisioned at the back end in order to make a team possible. A team leverages all of these in different environments. So think of Teams just as an application that enables you to access all of these other areas. We've got Exchange Online provisioning Office 365 groups. We've got Azure Active Directory managing authentication and access. Personal drives in OneDrive for business. Each team gets a SharePoint Online site for sharing files. And there's a whole host of other capabilities in Office 365 that Teams then leverages. However, when you create a team, permissions are flat by design. This is not an oversight. This is a deliberate act. And what it basically means is if I'm added to a team at day one, and I'm a member or even an owner of that team, every file that's created in that team I have access to, and I have access to it until somebody removes me from the team. And that applies to internal and external users equally. And so this is, as I said, not something that is a fault. This is designed to ensure that collaboration is as easy as possible. However, what we find within organizations is the number of teams grows exponentially. So you may have thousands or even tens of thousands of team sites and the associated SharePoint sites after the first year of using this platform. What then happens is, can you get a really clear view of what is happening where within the environment? And the answer is often no. You can't always see who has access to the information and what information remains in those environments, let alone whether that information is sensitive or not. So we talk about sharing. Sharing is caring in most cases. But in terms of activity in Microsoft Teams, you actually have to go to multiple different places to really understand what's going on. Even if you're an owner of a team, you can't accurately answer just by looking at the Teams UI who has access to what information is in that team. And also you can't easily detail who is doing what with that. Are they creating content, deleting it, creating new sharing locations, or deleting them? It's very, very difficult to answer that question. Allied to this then is the amount of complex sharing settings that we also have within the environment as well. You can share at multiple different levels from the tenant down. And this can be complicated, especially if you're sharing a tenant with another organization. Now you can turn around and block sharing. What that will generally lead to do is mean that people will fall back on shadow IT, email documents around both internally and externally, and it causes additional problems. One of the other challenges with Microsoft Teams is that there is a feature in a team called private channels, which is right at the bottom of the slide there. What this does is it allows you to have a subset of the team. So say you have 10 members in the team, 5 of them can have access to an area within that team that is reserved for just those 5. And this can be a great way of sharing that kind of more sensitive content within a team. Unfortunately, that private channel is not visible in SharePoint Online administration. And this is not the only strange visibility gap that we see within Teams. If you go to the team, you can't see sharing that occurred in SharePoint Online, for example, but if you go to SharePoint Online, you can only see the groups, owners, members, and guests. You can't see the members of those groups. So to really answer the question, who has access to what within those kind of environments, you have to go to SharePoint, to Teams, and even sometimes to Azure Active Directory to really get an understanding of what's going on. You ally this to then the idea that, as we talked about before, a lot of these questions that we're talking about here are going to include those hybrid scenarios as well, as in data both being Office 365 and on premises. And you soon find out that actually it's very, very difficult to answer those questions at the beginning in Office 365, but globally across the organization as well. So to summarize, it really depends whom you ask and at what time and in what place to get the answer to the questions I talked about at the beginning. There's a lot of sharing that's going to happen within those Teams environments. There's a lot of data that's going to be created and moved into those Teams environments, and a lot of people are going to be left on Teams where they don't require that access anymore. And a lack of centralized visibility and control means the answers to those questions I started this presentation with are extremely problematic. All of these things are not hugely problematic if you have one team. But when you start to have 100 teams or 1,000 teams or even multiple tens of thousands of teams, keeping on top of exactly what's going on is very, very difficult. And this is why I think it's important that we look at, say, a tool like Varonis to really understand, what we can do about this. What's the solution? So I just want to flick over here just for a second into our actual Varonis console here. Okay, so now we're going to take you through a little bit of a demo of what this looks like when we're using Varonis to try and understand some of the challenges that we talked about during the slide presentation. So here we have the Varonis web interface, and the first thing I want to show you really is the high-level view of our environments within Office 365. And as you can see on the left-hand side here, I've got SharePoint Online, OneDrive, Exchange Online. I can drill down directly into those. Now, what I've done here is pulled out a couple of widgets that kind of help us understand, what's going on with our environment. First of all, I can see how many sensitive files I have. And this is the same sensitivity that I would have done, for the on-premises environments as well. So we have one set of sensitivity across both locations. And straight away, you can see that I've got Microsoft Teams broken out. So I can see exactly where my teams are, as well as Microsoft Teams private channels. So we discussed those in the presentation, but just to repeat, these are channels within a team that have a differing permission set to the team overall. And due to the fact you can only have one set of permissions on a document library, this means that a new SharePoint site is created for each time you use one of these. And so it's a real challenge to keep on top of where these private channels are within the environment and the documents that they contain. However, in Office 365, from Varonis's perspective, we can see them directly in here. We've also seen other useful pieces of information, such as how many files are shared publicly, which is where there is an anonymous guest link activated. So anyone with that URL can access that document without authenticating. And where sensitive files are shared with external users as well. We can also see stale information on this location as well as information, public and external sharing that isn't, on sensitive files. So let's just take a look at our Microsoft Teams here. I can drill straight down from here into which teams I have within my organization. And straight away, I'm able to see exactly where they are. Obviously, they're on SharePoint, the path to those, but importantly, whether or not they are sensitive. And we can see straight away here that we have, certain teams within this location that do contain sensitive files and the files that they contain, or the type of files and classification that they contain. And that's really useful from this perspective. So we can see here that, for example, bonuses here is one of those files. And this is one we're going to concentrate on a little bit moving forward. When I go back to the dashboard as well, I can see the same thing within private channels. So I can drill down directly into here, and I can see my list of private channels that are associated with those teams as well. And I can see there, you can see bonuses, international bonuses, and again, it's marked as sensitive. So within a couple of clicks, I can see exactly where my teams are, and then I can start to think about, okay, well, if I know my teams, I can start to prioritize which ones I'm going to look at because I can see the information in them that's sensitive. If I then head over to my work area, what I'm able to do is add in my various resources into the tree here, and then start to expand out a little bit to sort of understand what's going on within these environments. Now, as you can see in my particular location here in SharePoint, I've got just about 15,500 hits of sensitive data, and I can go out here and see, which ones of these are PII, GDPR, etc., which classifications they've hit, and where I have utilized the classification labeling, I can see the AIP labels that are associated to that data as well. So obviously my SharePoint, the data that's unstructured and sensitive is in my sites location. And as you can see here, the majority of these are teams. You can see the little purple icon denoting the team, as opposed to the site collections here, which are obviously from standard SharePoint site collections. So let's just take a look at this one here. I can double click on my bonuses file and open it up, and I can immediately see whom in one location has access to this information. It doesn't matter whether they've been shared directly as part of the team, as we talked about before, or whether they are actually part of, have been given access via a sharing link. And we can drill down into all of these. Now, these red X's here actually denote that Varonis has actually analyzed this user and recommended that they be removed from here because they're actually not using the access or they don't fit the profile of someone who would. I can drill right down into my documents, find the file that contains the data. I can go in, analyze that. I can either analyze it from a summary perspective and ask it to bring back exactly why it's been classified as sensitive, and you can see the patterns here, or I can even bring it back and the file back into memory, into Varonis, and actually see in context where that sensitive information is. But in my particular case here, what I'm really interested in is who has access to this location. So again, I can see a sharing link here. I can see that's been pushed out to Margaret Bloom. And so I want to maybe understand a little bit more about where Margaret has additional access. Now, there's a couple of ways I can do this. Varonis is a bi-directional service here, so I can double-click Margaret on the sharing link. Obviously, that will come up various different locations where her account has actual access into here. And you can see there are a lot of red X's here, a lot of places that we might need to remove that access. Or I can look at it more globally and actually run a report to say, okay, tell me where we have Azure Active Directory groups with external users that are being used on my, that are giving access to my team's environment. As you can see here, I've already pre-run that report. I can run it as logon name here, and I can look for Margaret. And again, I can see easily where she has access and what level of access she has. Now, if I want to take this one step further, I can also take, a bit of a wider view at this. And in this particular report here, I'm looking at the effective permissions on sensitive files across the whole organization. And as you can see, I've got a huge amount of hit here across all the different permissions that are on everything within Office 365. Now, what I want to do is just maybe take a look at where that affects Margaret. Okay, so what I've done here is just search for her surname, Bloom, and then what I can do now is start to see, okay, well, these are the places within my OneDrive, for example, my.sharepoint.com, where Margaret has access. So I can pull down here and start to take a look at that. I can see the various names where it is, and I can see, for example, pick someone. We've got Ellen Cabrera here, so we know that that access is active on her OneDrive. So what I'm going to do here is go back to my Data Advantage. I'm going to minimize my SharePoint and open up my OneDrive account. As you can see, it's my.sharepoint.com that denotes that it's OneDrive. Just going to open that up, and I'm going to see all of the OneDrives in my location and my environment. Pull down here. There's Ellen. Open this up. Look in the documents. We can see some sensitivity over here. Microsoft Teams chat files. And again, we can see Margaret has access to those. So we have the contribute, guest links, access on both of those files within there. So within a couple of seconds, I've been able to understand where Margaret as an external user has access across my entire environment. Now, you might be saying to me, well, that's all well and good, but external sharing might not be activated on an environment. And that's true. So if we look at, say, somebody who is internal, like Alan, for example, here. So this is an internal user. The great power of Varonis is really that we can then pull back exactly where Alan has access across multiple different locations. And with a couple of clicks, I can see, okay, Alan has access onto my corp filers. And we can see again my file share permissions there across various different parts of my corp file estate. But I can also then pull back and show, for example, where Alan has access on OneDrives as well. So you can start to open out, different locations where Alan has access across my OneDrive for Business and what access he has. So obviously he has full control over his own, but he has some other full control areas as well within this location. And of course, we can do the same thing with SharePoint and the same thing with Exchange Online as well. So I'll just open those out. You can just take a quick look. There we can see various different levels of access across SharePoint. And finally, because we want to just be complete about this, we take a look at where he has access across Exchange Online. Now, you probably wouldn't do it in this way. Obviously, I'm doing this to show you the capabilities within the work area. You probably more likely run a report to be able to pull this information back, but it is useful to be able to see at any given point what access someone has within the organization. And really, whether you have external user access in OneDrive turned on or off, whether you have public access turned on or off, it really doesn't make a lot of difference. I mean, I think back in our Ellen Crabera folder area there as well, I just wanted to show one little extra piece as well, which is the anonymous logins, because I think we missed that one off just a second ago. So if I look at Ellen here, I open this up. I'm sorry, Ellen, I open this up. Look at the documents. Again, double click on the document in question. In this case, we can see that most people have it, but that anonymous logon is in effect there as well. So Margaret has that, and by virtue of the shared publicly, you know, multiple people could have access to that sensitive document as well. Back to our work area, just to complete things, we talked a lot about SharePoint Online, but we have the same thing in OneDrive here as well. So we are able, utilizing Varonis, to really go from a high-level view here of what's happening within, say, the OneDrive site, how many sites I have, how many files, how many are sensitive, right down into the weeds of who has access to what, and run those reports regularly on exactly what content is available to whom, whether it's internal or external oversharing on sensitive or non-sensitive data that you care about. Varonis can supply you with that information within a few clicks. Now, if I move forward and start talking about something slightly different here, what we're really thinking about now is, okay, well, what happens when we have a situation where, you know, we're less bothered about the actual standing permissions to a resource, or where that resource is sensitive, but what we're really interested in is how things are changing. And so Varonis also gives you the ability to run the searches on changes to various different environments. So for example, here what I'm looking at is I've got two servers accessed here in events, and I'm looking at all the event changes over the past day on Azure Active Directory and Active Directory within my demo environment. And what you can see straight away is Varonis gives you all of that information within a couple of seconds. And then we also give you not only a timeline of those events, but then ways of very easily being able to refine down what I'm looking at. So I can think of, okay, how many of these events were involved in alerts that may have been triggered, how many are by administration accounts, etc. And I can simply click on these and get a really clear view of what is actually happening within my environment. But what I want to do here basically today is just take a look at how we might use this as a bit more of an investigation. So I'm looking at all my events, and I want to look at what type of events have happened. So I'll click on my refiner here, and I'm going to see all the different type of events that have happened. You can see login is by far and away the most populous, along with, you know, account authentication. But what I'm really interested here is to look at the group members that have been added. So I'm going to apply this to the refiner. And what I'm now going to do is take a look at, okay, well, here's all my events that happen, but I'm actually going to take a look at my list view. So I'm going to move around a little bit here, change from table to list, look at show all, because what I want to see is all of the information that's actually been captured as part of any one of those events, and see if any of it's any use, you know, in order to my reports. Well, there's a couple of things that stand out here. Event description, so where someone was added. So Bart Wex added to the sales group, and then the account type. So exactly which account type is in there as well. And also, you know, the object name as well. So these are all things that we want to pull in together. So we see the object name on the location. All these things we want to be pulling together in order to make our report more useful. So we'll head back to our table view. And then what we're going to do now is look at the attributes field. So this is where we add in additional fields within our report here. So we'll add the event description as we saw before. And I'm also going to add the event. Apply both of those. And what that will do is it will add them over to this far-hand side. So that's no good. So I want to bring them all the way across here, back. And I want to do the same with my object name, all the way across here, because this is the information I'm interested in. So very clearly here, now what you can see is we now have a very clear understanding of what has been happening. We can see the event description, we can see who did the event, so by a particular user. We can see the event type, which we know is going to be added, because that's what we were looking at before. And we can see where the object was actually indicated on. Now, what I might be thinking now is, okay, well, that's really useful, but how do I, I don't want to be doing that every time. So what I'm going to do is actually save this as a search. So I'm going to save this as new user added, save that. And then over here on this left-hand side, I can see that search has now been saved. So if I just do my serve searches only, we go down here and there you go. You can see that new user added search has been added. Now, what I can do is obviously when I log into this environment, I can keep my searches for me or share them with anyone else using Varonis. But a really useful tool is then being able to go over to the scheduled searches part here. I can go into a scheduled search. I can create and say new user, scheduled search. I can link the search in that I've just created. So I link the searches that I've in before. So I'll just search that. So I'll just search for new. There it is. Add that in. And then basically tell the scheduled search who to notify and when. And in this way, what we're able to do is very easily get to a position where these type of searches can be scheduled and the users can get access to these scheduled searches whenever they need. Moving towards an automation. So if you know there are certain things within changes to your environment that you want to be alerted on and report on regularly, you can build out these reports, get the information that you need, move it around, and basically start to understand, what information we need, run it on a regular basis. And that means that anyone interested, whether it's department leads, data owners, IT administration, DPO, whoever it is, they can get those kind of regular reports. Now, how do we take this one step further? Well, we can see that, we've got a lot of event descriptions here. So what I'm going to do now is look at a little bit about refining it from department as well. So I'm interested in finance because I know that's where a lot of my sensitive data is because I've used Varonis to help understand and analyze that. I'm going to press apply, run this from here. And what do you know? I can see exactly where Margaret Bloom was added into the environment. And I can see where from. I can see who did it, when they did it, etc., etc. And so suddenly, all of that lack of visibility that happens when you move out information into Office 365 all disappears. And you can very easily, with the tools, start to build out a regular report on exactly what's happened, what's changed, and be able to center it around the parts of the organization that are most important. This is actually vital as the team environments grow and you end up with many hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of teams environments. The ability to be able to pivot and understand what's going on with all of this is absolutely vital. Now, as the next stage thing, what I might want to do is, okay, well, I know now Zoe has added Margaret into that group. She's an external user, and I now know there's a lot of sensitive data that's going to be given out in that location. What I want to do now is understand what else Zoe's been doing. So what I'm going to do is open up my search. So I'm going to look at everything. I'm going to look at my cloud locations, my Active Directories, my on-prem SharePoint, my cloud SharePoint, my proxy, everything that I have under monitoring with Varonis. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to search by user. And this is going to tell me everything that Zoe has done over a specific time period. Just type that properly. A bit ahead of myself there. There she is. Run the search. And Varonis, within a couple of seconds, pulls back everything that's happened over the last day. Now, what I can do, of course, is if I'm doing a forensic analysis, maybe scope that back to the last 14 days, etc. Again, I can change around and move around all the information on here as well. But maybe I want to then now pivot by event type. So instead of using the refiners, I'm just going to take this up here and I'm going to pivot by this event type. Open this out so I can see what's going on. Look at, say, for example, file deleted, and I can see when a particular file was deleted by Zoe and start to understand whether or not that's normal behavior. All of this power is basically straight out the box once you connect Varonis up to your Office 365 environments. But obviously what we're doing here as well is connecting, as we're also monitoring on-prem as well. And so what in one fell swoop, we've managed to understand exactly what our users are doing across all our multiple different locations, whether they're in the cloud, whether they're on premises, and we can start to then understand exactly, what's happening with our environment and understand, if there are any malicious threats within there. Now, just to finish off here as well, we can now look at our alerting dashboard. So once we understand, we've got down to best least privilege on all our SharePoint and OneDrive environments, we're minimizing where we're sharing information, and we understand why information is being shared. Varonis has built out an understanding of exactly what is happening within each environment. So now we can start to see whether or not accounts are behaving properly or not. So for example, we can see alerted devices, alerted users, and we've also got particular threat models here that have triggered based upon, for example, service accounts accessing data that they don't normally do. But what I want to look at here is this GDPR data shared publicly. I can go into here. Again, I get pulled directly into exactly what has happened. So we can see that Alan, who was the user internally I searched for before, has shared some GDPR data publicly, and that is what's triggered the alert, because that's not something that Alan would normally do. And the sensitive information being made external to the environment is something that this customer has decided that is something that they want to make sure that they have an alert on. We can click down into the alert details here and understand why that was alerted, and is there any other information around Alan or anything else to do with this that has some wider ramifications. So we can see an understanding of the threat model. We can see that the account is stale or new. So that may mean that this account is been compromised. Perhaps Alan maybe doesn't work for the organization or anymore, or is in extended hiatus. So we need to understand more of the context than rather just one alert. Varonis takes multiple events to build into one alert. And so you can be sure that if something is alerted, it's likely that it's worth taking a look at. We can then drill down into the alerted events, find out exactly what's happening. And as before, we can see that the file share link was created. We can see that on which particular location. And as before, one of the great things about this is that we can pull back all of this additional data around exactly what has happened. And each one of these fields is pivotable. So if I want to take any location, whether it's time, date, alert severity, anything I want to do, I can add this into here with a simple click. I can add it either to a column in the report, or add it into the search in order to make sure that that's going to be pulled back like that. So I can pull all of this information directly from into here as well. So moving back to my presentation, I just wanted to finish off with what you can do next. All Varonis customers work with us on what we call the operational journey. And really what we're looking to do here is deploy the tool, operationalize it, fix, but move to that automation stage where you have a situation where user access is remediated, only the right people have access to data both on premises and in the cloud, and changes to that data is reported on a regular basis where you can then go in and fix that. We use the lens of staleness, of user and account privilege, of data sensitivity to be able to really help you prioritize which parts of your Office 365 environment you need to look at. And by doing that, we help you improve and move forward. Varonis covers a whole host of platforms. We've been talking a lot about Office 365 today, but we also cover on-premises, as we mentioned as well, Windows servers, NAS boxes, etc., NetApp, AMC, Isilon, and so on. We take Teams very, very seriously, as we see that it's probably the main driver for particularly expansion of data growth within Office 365. We're generally one of the most likely places that we're going to find data risks as we move forward. We also look at directory services, both Azure AD and AD on-prem, and we take in VPN, DNS, and web proxy information as well to make sure that we have all the information that we can to be able to pull information around users and data, build out what we call a peacetime profile of normal behavior for that user. We then look at what are they doing, what they have access to, and help you report and decide whether or not that's appropriate. The ultimate goal of this being able to answer those use cases that we have right in the beginning around data protection, privacy and compliance, threat detection and response, and improving the data security while you have this move to remote working. All of our customers start with a free risk assessment. This is where someone with my role, system engineer, will come in, deploy our software, and basically let that run for a short amount of time. That will then give you a view of all of the data points we've been talking about before. Where is my overexposed data? Where is it stale? Where is it sensitive? And importantly, who has access to what? From day one, Varonis alerting is also present then on your systems. And we've seen and helped users secure their environment at a higher level, even during our data risk assessment. This is before they've actually become customers. Please get in touch with the guys from Bytes if you want to talk any more about this. It's a very lightweight install. It takes, like I say, no more than a few hours to get it in place. And then within a week or so, you'll have a whole host of rich data that you can pivot and manipulate to get an understanding of what's going on within your Office 365 environment. Hope that was useful. Thanks a lot. Feel free to reach out to either myself or any of the guys at Bytes, but thank you.